Moving on here, the financials, one of the sectors falling hard in today's sell-off, and the Chartmaster says it is time to bail on the banks. Let's get to Cornerstone Macro's Carter Braxton Worth with more on this. Hey, Carter.
How are you? Well, there's so many problems, but I've got three charts. Before we get to it, what we know is, down 28% as a sector, the financials, versus the market 12 year to date. But the real problem is, if you sell off during the sell-off more, which is what it did, right? The financials drop 35%, 42% versus the 35 of the S&P, but you should get a better rebound. So if you look at materials, industrials, energy, they all rebounded over the last month and a half, much more than the market. With cyclicality and beta, you should have gotten that from financials. You did not. In any event, that is one of the problems. Three charts. The first is a long-term chart, and the real tragedy, of course, is that the S&P 500 sector, in its totality, never could get above its 2007 peak, and you can see that there clearly. So it's a well-defined break in trend and a perfect double top. Now, what's also at issue is relative performance. The second chart is the same. It's a two-panel chart, and you can see it's, again, the financial sector on top, but it's the relative performance of the S&P. We are right now flirting with, for the entire sector, breaching the '09 relative low. We know banks themselves, regional and large, have undercut the '09 low, but the sector has obviously big names like American Express and CME and Berkshire. But what I think is about to happen is that this also will make a new low, and that's a problem. Finally, look at XLF, just the vehicle that you can trade. Well-defined minor tops there at that 24 level. A failure, a pretty dramatic one, precisely at that level. We're down now just in the last 3 days, 7.5% from peak to the low of today. Again, more than the market. So you have this unhappy circumstance of going down more than the market during the plunge, 44 versus 35, not bouncing more than the market on the bounce, and now again going down more than the market when the market goes down. That is not a good setup.
All right. Carter, thanks. We'll see you on OA in just a few minutes. So Chartmaster says sell the banks.
You bet.
But if you caught yesterday's show, you'll remember Bank of America's Savita Subramanian said banks are an all-time buy.
When I look at financials, I think, okay, great. This is a sector that's probably going to recover faster than others in an upturn. It's also priced relatively conservatively. It still looks relatively cheap versus other areas of the market. And then when you think about quality, it's got income potential. And then the kicker, and the reason I'm bringing it up on fast money from a trading perspective, is that it is deeply underweight by investors.
So who do you think is getting it right, Tim?
Well, Carter's long-term charts are hard to argue with in terms of how financials have performed over a long period of time. But I would also say financials over the last 3 weeks have massively outperformed the S&P. So while their bounce hasn't exceeded the S&P on the way up here, it has as we've started to get some insight into their balance sheets and as we've gotten into earnings season. So Savita's point is also market positioning and where people are positioned. Something is not right here. We've said this. Karen says this. I've said this. If you look at banks relative to the market, one is not consistent with the other. I actually think banks have more room to close on the market. In other words, I would be a buyer of banks relative to the market in the environment we have today. I think we're all talking about macro that's not great, but as sector-wise, I can own banks here.
Steve, what do you say? Who's right?
Yeah, I think Carter is right. If you look at these charts, it's undeniable, these double, triple tops. This is where the XLF topped out in 07 and 18 and in 19. And if you look at them now, they look like they can drop on an XLF basis another 15% lower from here. And those are all your large money center banks. I would go with the investment managers if you want to be exposed to financials with a BlackRock versus going with a money center bank. It doesn't look very hopeful in the near term.
Guy?
You remember in The Running Man when Richard Dawson asked a woman in the crowd to pick her favorite stalker and she couldn't do it? She was having such trouble doing it because she liked them all.
That's what I found myself here.
Yeah, maybe you should Google it or get on the Netflix this week. Excellent movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. At any rate, I tend to favor Savita here only because I think, banks aren't going to be the problem this time. So I get what CBW is saying, and I love Carter's work, but JP Morgan, with a tangible book, at least the way they measured it at 62, given where it's trading now, I think it's value here. So I'm with Savita from yesterday.
Quick, BK, your thoughts?
I think when you sell these banks, you sell them. When you're done with that, you sell them again. That's what I think. These banks are going lower.
All right, I wonder what you really feel.